Alright guys, how you doing? It's Rabea, hope you're all well. So it's been a little while since I've made a video on behalf of Origin Effects. I've done plenty of videos about Origin Effects before. I actually use a couple of their pedals all the time, like the Revival Drive Compact. Absolutely love that pedal, and also the Kali 76 stacked compressor. So today I'm introducing a brand new pedal called the HALCYON Green Overdrive from Origin Effects. I bet you can already guess what it is. Of course it's an overdrive pedal, but it's a very specific overdrive pedal that we all know and love as the Tube Screamer. First Tube Screamer was made famous really back in the Blues Players days. You know, the little Ibanez STS 808, the infamous green Tube Screamer that loads of people have, loads of iconic blues players used. But then fast forward to the modern day, Tube Screamers get used for high gain metal tones all the time. One thing that Origin pointed out with this pedal is they didn't want it to just be another sort of Tube Screamer. It does way more than a Tube Screamer, and some of the features on the pedal actually make a big difference as to why that is possible. The first thing I'll point out is that you can see there are 4 knobs on this pedal as opposed to your classic Tube Screamer that has a level, a drive and a tone. On this pedal we've got level, drive, tone and dry. If you've ever noticed using a Tube Screamer on a lower gain tone, when you try and drive it, you can hear the drive signal coming through. I've never really liked that, and that's useful when you're in front of a high gain amp because it's giving you drive signal to hit the front of the amp harder. I've never really liked the way that sounded, so one thing I like about this is that I can dial out the drive signal on a low gain tone and just hear the drive signal of the pedal, and that allows me to blend it closer to the sound of my amplifier and get much more enjoyable sort of low gain edge of breakup tones if I want them. Now the second and probably the most exciting feature of this pedal is the adapt switch. Let's say you dial in like a mid to low gain breakup tone with the pedal, and traditionally a Tube Screamer gives you that mid forward push. Well, with the adapt feature it reacts to your playing dynamic but also to your volume pot. Another great feature is the voice switch, so you can either have the classic 808 style voicing with that classic mid hump, or you can move it over to the mod voice, which gives a little bit more presence, a little bit more clarity up there, which is great for cleaning up humbuckers, neck humbuckers, or anything with a lot of gain even using humbuckers. So it's really nice that they included that in there for humbucker players too. So as you can imagine, it's a more advanced Tube Screamer. It sounds pretty exciting. We're going to check it out. We're going to put it in front of my twin sister, my VX100 and my Soldano, and we're going to hear how it reacts to low gain tones and high gain tones. So without further ado, let's check out the Origin Effects HALCYON Green Overdrive. Okay, let's get stuck in. The Strat's in D standard, just so you're all aware. It's just I prefer it down there. And we're running into the twin sister first and foremost. So let me show you how it sounds. So that's the sound of the guitar. Any reverb and delay you're hearing is coming from Archetype Petrucci, and yeah, let's go and crack on straight away. So here is the HALCYON. As you can see, I've got everything dialed in at 12 except the drive, and there's no voice switch on and no adapt switch on. So really what we're running now is a conventional Tube Screamer. In fact, no, it's not. Let's do that. I'm running the dry on full, which is what you'd expect, and the drive at just under a quarter. So let's check it out. So I don't know what it is about Origin pedals, but they all have a very certain sound to them. Just want to say that there are building works happening right outside my house, so apologies for any of the weird and annoying sounds you might hear during this video. So I'm already into the way it sounds. Before we move to the adapt feature, I'm just going to try this dry control, because obviously we're running a cleaner tone right now. So as I bring the drive up, you know, let's have a listen. From this, sounds pretty good, but let's bring down the dry to halfway. up the drive, you can back off the dry level and it gives you more of the drive tone, obviously. But I like that because you can use a tube screamer like this in a more overdrive pedally way. I don't know what I'm trying to say other than that I know normal tube screamers give you that dry signal thing that's always done my head in, but this is cool because you can get rid of that. So you notice it becomes less transient filled because you're taking out that dry signal, which is obviously a clean amp, so you get less body and you get less punch on the when you play certain notes. So obviously it's a compressed driven sound, so it's like if I bring up the dry, you should hear more punch. And then take it out. And then finally all the way back in. Right, next up, I want to try the adapt because that's a very important feature on this pedal. So before I do this, I just want to read out what you should be listening for when I turn on the adapt feature, just so that you can hear how it works. So we get a mid-gain tone with the pedal, on the edge if you want to call it that, with the amp. And then the idea is that we keep the adapt switch off, and then with our guitar all the way up, volume-wise, we want to play a chord, switch the adapt feature on, and you should notice the tonal change be slightly, just a bit minimal at that point. But the idea being that once we've turned it on and I roll my guitar volume back, you should hear that mid-forward voicing that's very synonymous with the tube screamer. That should back off a bit and it should clean up really nicely. That should be what we should hear. And then just to show you how big that change is, I'll keep my volume rolled off that much and then just switch the adapt back off, and you should notice that bass and treble will be dramatically reduced. So that's cool because what it allows you to do is retain that fullness that goes away with the tube screamer. Okay, let's test it out. So I'm going to play a chord. Now I'm going to switch on the adapt feature. I noticed a tiny bit more low end, but not overly drastic in any other way. So we've got it turned on to position 2 now. So it's definitely not as mid-forward and it's cleaned up nicely, but when I strum a chord and turn it back off, we should hear a difference. We should hear how much of a difference it's actually made. So here we go. So I don't know about you guys on the other end of YouTube, but it's fairly obvious in the room to me, and I'm not just saying that. I can certainly hear a sort of a mid. When you turn it off, you suddenly hear that mid hump come back, which doesn't help when you're rolling off your volume, especially when you're trying to use a pedal like this. When it's turned off, kind of sounds a little bit thin, does the tube screamer, but when you put adapt back on, it's a really cool thing, because when you roll off the volume and you're using other pedals in combination, it should be more forgiving, should the tube screamer, unless you obviously want that to be retained, that sort of mid-hump thing that it does. But I like the fact that it'll help smoothen out other pedal combinations depending on where you put it in your chain by using your volume control. What I've dialed in now with sort of half dry signal, tons of gain with the adapt in position 2, it gives you the grunty British barky rock thing. But when you roll it off, It's like it retains the harmonic content of your original signal. In any case, let's move on. Let's try this in more traditional Tube Screamer applications. Okay, quick guitar swap. I'm using the Mayonnaise Aquilar Elite S, and I've got the Nolly Polymath humbuckers in there because they sound amazing. Okay, well, so for the sake of experimentation, we're going to stay on the Twin Sister, and this is the sound I've got. So I'm just going to throw on the Halcyon, and I'm just going to dial in a higher gain tone and see if we get rid of that dry signal, what it sounds like. That's not, a Tube Screamer doesn't do that. So just while I remember, I'm going to throw on the mod switch so now we can hear it with height and presence and stuff because I'm using Humbucker, so check it out. So next, I'm just going to keep this sound and I'm going to move to the neck humbucker and we'll try that mod switch to see how much it changes the voicing. It said, to be fair, that adding it should give you a little bit more clarity for things like humbuckers and neck pickups, so let's try it. So. Does exactly what they said it did. Okay, so now I've got it into the VX100 on kind of a lowish crunch. Let's put everything back to 12 and see what happens. So just be messing around, dialing in between using the dry signal to hit the front of the amp harder or using just the drive. Obviously, when you move away from a clean tone, you have to treat these things differently because, you know, it being a crunch amp, you already got gain, so you don't necessarily need to use, if you just want to hear the pedal tone, don't use the level and maybe back off some of that dry signal, just hear the pedal tone come through. But if you want to hit the front of the amp harder and blend in a bit more of the actual crunch tone, then you'd use the drive and hit the level a bit harder. Last but by no means least, let's get a little bit filthy. So let's throw it in front of the SLO and dial in your classic Tube Screamer tone and see what happens. So I've got the SLO set up. This is how it sounds straight in. Very SLO-y. And now I've got the Halcyon set up how I think it should work, and I want to demonstrate how the dry signal helps with that sort of archetypal sort of Tube Screamer effect that we use high gain amps for. So I've got rid of the drive's all the way out as well. Tone and level are where you'd expect. So let's see what happens. This is in 808 mode. So without the dry signal in, it does actually sound a little bit gruntier, a little bit more, because we're pushing it a bit. There's the signal from the pedal itself hitting the front of the amp. It does sound good without the dry signal in. Let's see what happens as we blend it in more. It's great. I like it with the dry signal up. Obviously it's hotter, it's driving everything a bit harder, but the way it works with a high gain amplifier certainly feels great. And what I like is having, again, the control of the dry signal, jumping between, you know, a little bit and a lot is nice. Okay then, well that about wraps it up for the Origin Effects Halcyon Green Overdrive. It's way more than a tube screamer. Maybe in a situation where you may have combined a tube screamer with a couple of other pedals to achieve a certain tone, you can now do in there because you've got control of the dry, giving you more of that just drive signal if you want to use that. The mod switch can change the response and the feel against your pickups depending on humbucker and single coil. And of course the adapt switch. I don't have the retail on this pedal right now, but I'm assuming that it will be more expensive than you sort of other tube screamers or overdrive pedals that you can get, because of course Origin do, you know, stand by making the best quality with the best components, best sound quality and all the rest of it. And a lot of their pedals are on the dearer side of things, so I wouldn't expect much less from this, but that's besides the point. If you do have a need for this kind of pedal and you like the way it sounds, or you're just curious and want to try it out in your rig and see how well it works with what you do, then yeah, check it out. But as always, thank you to Origin Effects for sending this pedal over for me to check out. I really appreciate that. And thank you all for watching this video. I will link everything in the description box. Let me know what you think in the comments section. Like, subscribe and share if you like my content. And I will see you all very soon.